Good evening, everybody, and welcome to this evening's Tropical Atlantic Update. So, looking at Hurricane Lee as of 5 p.m. Atlantic Standard Time, Monday, September the 11th, Hurricane Lee has maximum sustained winds of 115 miles per hour, a minimum central pressure of 948 millibars, and west-northwesterly movement at 7 miles per hour. Margaret is now a hurricane with 75-mile-per-hour winds, central pressure of 988 millibars, and northerly movement at 12 miles per hour. And then we have Invest 98L, which has a 70% chance of tropical cyclone formation over the next 7 days. So looking at the latest cone for Hurricane Lee is expected to remain a major hurricane through Wednesday afternoon and weaken to a hurricane by Thursday morning and remain a hurricane as Lee is now expected to move just off the coast of Cape Cod, New England, and south of Nova Scotia by Saturday afternoon, 2 p.m. So if you're across New England and Nova Scotia, New Brunswick, make sure you're really paying attention to Hurricane Lee, as the cone is now very close to you, and in some cases we have the cone going into Cape Cod towards Boston and southwestern Nova Scotia. Looking at the latest Zoom Earth satellite imagery for Hurricane Lee has a really nice structure once again to it, but for some reason it can't is struggling to strengthen even though it was forecasted to, and this is very good news down the line for Bermuda and especially Atlantic Canada. The weaker we can keep Hurricane Lee, the better, and the less the impacts are going to be. So the animation is kind of struggling, so I'm going to be showing you the forecasted cone. 120 mile per hour category 3 major hurricane by Tuesday 1 a.m. Central Time. Tuesday 1 p.m. 120 mile per hour category 3 major hurricane moving to the west northwest. And then Wednesday 1 a.m. 115 mile per hour category 3 major hurricane starting to curve to the north. And I'm going to mention no threat at all to the Bahamas, Turks, and Caicos anymore. Going into Wednesday 1 p.m. 115 mile per hour category 3 major hurricane moving to the north. By Thursday 1 a.m. Central Time, 110 mile per hour category 2 hurricane moving to the north. By Thursday 1 p.m. Central Time, 105 mile per hour category 2 hurricane moving to the north, passing about 150 miles west of Bermuda. And then as we go into Friday 1 p.m. Central Time, 90 mile per hour category 1 hurricane moving to the north. And then by Saturday 1 p.m., Lee is expected to start to race to the north as a 75 mile per hour category 1 hurricane approaching Nova Scotia and Maine. Looking at the latest infrared satellite imagery of Hurricane Lee, I have a prediction as to why Lee has been struggling to intensify. Lee has been undergoing continual eyewall replacement cycles over the last couple of days, and these eyewall replacement cycles have caused Lee has inhibited Lee from strengthening, and so these eyewall replacement cycles have really been saving my friends across Atlantic Canada and New England from any potential extreme impacts from Hurricane Lee. So looking at the latest spaghetti model guidance for Hurricane Lee in the next 96 hours or 4 days, Lee is expected to pass about 100 to 150 miles west of Bermuda, and then as we go into the next 120 hours or 5 days, Hurricane Lee is expected to start to approach either New England, but most likely Nova Scotia from the south, and make a landfall either in southern New Brunswick or southwestern Nova Scotia in about 6 days from now. But we do have a couple of these models curving Lee towards Massachusetts, Cape Cod, and towards Maine. So if you live across New England and Atlantic Canada, New Brunswick, and Nova Scotia, make sure you're really monitoring Lee as you are now on the path of the storm, and thankfully, as I mentioned earlier, it's staying weaker than forecasted. Looking at the intensity model guidance, Lee is no longer expected to become a Category 4 hurricane by most of the models, and weaken to a Category 2 in the next 3 days and to a Category 1 in the next 5 to 6 days as Lee approaches either New England or Atlantic Canada. And looking at the GEFS ensemble tracks for Hurricane Lee, most of the tracks are taking Lee into Nova Scotia, several into New Brunswick, and we even have a few of the GEFS ensembles taking Lee into Maine, a couple across eastern Massachusetts, New Hampshire. So these are trends that are going to have to be watched closely going down towards Bermuda. Some of these models are getting a little too close for comfort once again for Bermuda. So make sure also, I would be making tropical storm preparations if you live in Bermuda, as you'll likely be seeing tropical storm impacts in about 3 to 4 days. And looking at the European model ensembles, the European model ensembles showing the same as the GEFS, we are seeing a Lee pass about 50 to 200 miles west of Bermuda, and then the European ensembles are really latching onto a Nova Scotia landfall, especially southwestern Nova Scotia, with a couple taking it into Maine and an outlier taking it into New York. And before I close the video, I'm going to read the key messages for Hurricane Lee. Dangerous surf and life-threatening rip currents will affect portions of the northern Leeward Islands, the Virgin Islands, Puerto Rico, Hispaniola, the Turks and Caicos Islands, the Bahamas, Bermuda, and most of the U.S. East Coast through much of the week. Lee could bring strong winds, rainfall, and high surf impacts to Bermuda later this week. Interest there should continue to monitor updates to the forecast of Lee during the next several days. It remains too soon to know what level of additional impacts Lee might have along the northeast U.S. coast and Atlantic Canada late this week and this weekend. However, wind and rainfall hazards will likely extend well away from the center as Lee grows in size. Users should continue to monitor updates to the forecast of Lee during the next several days. So I'm going to continue to keep you guys updated on Hurricane Lee over the next several days for my friends in Bermuda and especially New England and Atlantic Canada, as you are now in the path of Hurricane Lee. Thanks for watching this evening's Atlantic Tropical Update. Please stay safe and have a wonderful evening, my friends.